When we consider contracts that are legal and binding, there is none more powerful than the contract of marriage. Once someone becomes your spouse, that is your next of kin. If you are to happen and you have not signed additional contracts, that person controls everything. They come before your mother, they come before your father, and even your children. And that is something to understand that God honors marriage. And even in this day of government and leadership and corruption and all of those things, that contract has still remained intact as one of the most powerful contracts on earth. And that speaks volumes about how God values marriage and that relationship between a man and a woman. And that's something that we can't take lightly. It does not matter how much times change. It doesn't matter what you want to do or how you may feel. This is something that is so serious, and we always want to be mindful of that and honor God in marriage and make sure that we walk within the guidelines that are set by God about a marriage between a man and a woman. As always, I am so excited to be here for the Sanctuary Sunday School. And I'm really excited because this is the last week of this quarter, but it's also the last week of this season. As of the first Sunday in September, we start season 3 of the Sanctuary Sunday School. It's our second year anniversary, and I am so excited. I thank you so much. You have blessed me. I can't even express how much you have blessed me. Everybody who has been sending donations and partnering with me, everybody who's been watching every week, and everybody who's been commenting. As of next week, we will have a new set. I'm rolling out new things. You want to go to the website, www.thesanctuary.academy. You want to go ahead and subscribe not only to the YouTube channel, but put your name on our mailing list because I'm going to be sending out more study materials. You know, every year we got to step it up. So I have so much in store. Again, I thank you, and I'm so excited about this new season for the Sanctuary Sunday School. This week's subject is a covenant of love, and we can find this in the book of Ephesians. And this is Paul speaking about marriage. And I told you last week about my parents who've been married for 63 years. And I used to do a radio show. And I did a Valentine's Day show for my parents because, you know, who better to talk about love than a couple who's been married that long. And my dad said this. He said, on Valentine's Day, consider the shape of a Valentine. He said it is in the shape of a heart. He said that your wife should always be in your heart. And if you keep her in your heart, then you will always do what's right. And you will always love her and make the right decisions by her. And I thought that that was so touching, especially in this day of and age where you see married couples treat each other so casually and act as if they don't even mean anything to each other. As I've said this before, it's kind of like two people who live together just to split the bills. It is rare that you see a couple who's really in love and loving each other. And that's kind of a dangerous way to live because we see here Paul is doing some very strict teaching about marriage. And he starts with saying, submit to each other. That word submit, that is a powerful word when you sign that contract, when you stand at that altar. First of all, you're making vows. A vow is something that you don't break. This is me saying that I am making this commitment. I am making this covenant to you in the sight of these witnesses and in the sight of God. Your marriage is not even legal unless you have a witness. There's a reason for that because once you make those vows, you are not only legally bound to those vows, you're bound by God. And what happens is it becomes a sin when you break that vow. And I think that that's something that we need to really think about because you can't just go through church singing and praying when you're breaking your marriage vows, because when you do that, you are breaking a vow to the Lord, and that makes you unfit to minister and unfit to teach. And he talks about submitting to each other. You're submitting to please each other. You're submitting to be honest and to be faithful to each other. You're supposed to only have each other. You can't be married and have all of these relationships outside of your marriage. When it comes to your finances, it goes, you should consider your marriage first. When it comes to your priorities, your marriage comes first. And so you're submitting to each other. And then it says this, wives, submit to your husband. And it's something because my dad does a lot of weddings, and I'm noticing a lot of brides are having the word obey removed from the vows because they're not wanting to do what their husband's saying. And I'm thinking to myself, well, why would you marry someone and commit the rest of your life to someone when you don't trust their judgment and you don't want to obey them and you don't want to submit to them? But then the charge to the man is that you're the head. Now, being the head of the woman, and when you look at this, and when you look at how he's putting this, and all of the responsibilities that you love your wife as Christ loved the church, right there, we kind of glaze over that. Who would not submit to a man that loves you the way that Christ loves the church? Christ died for the church. He prepared for the church. He takes care of us. He loves us. He assures us that we're going to have everything that we need. And there's so many battles between the sexes. You know, men say this about women and women say that about men. And that's not the way that it's supposed to be. Back all the way back in Genesis, God said that Eve was a helpmeet to Adam. That indicates to me that men and women work together. We're not at odds. We're not challenging each other. You will never hear me bash a man. That is not the role that God gave me. We are subject to God and we are to submit to each other. And we see so many things where people abuse each other in marriage, and God is not accepting that. And he talks about, he lists all of these things here that the man should do. And then he talks about how you're going to leave mother and father and cleave to your wife. You become the head of that household, and the wife is submitting, and the wife is supporting, and the man is leading. And does that mean that you have to be submissive in a way that you can't think, you can't speak, you can't have any ideas? That's not what it means. It means that you guys are working together and that you believe in each other and that you trust each other, you honor each other, you prefer each other. And you will always hear me refer back to my parents because that's the example that I see. And at 63 years of marriage, at 83 years old, 82 years old, they have one vehicle and they are always together because they're both retired. I mean, always together 24/7. And when you look at them, they prefer to be with each other than anyone else. They don't care who comes and goes. As long as they have each other, they're happy. And sometimes when we think about marriage and we talk about marriage, I hear people make slack statements. I can't wait till my wife gone. I can't wait till my husband leaves. And when you hear that, and when you think about that, or either you'll hear single people saying, I don't want to get married because they've seen such negative examples of marriage that don't include love. But that is not what God has said. Marriage is ordained by God. And it is a beautiful thing. And we don't want to allow negative influences of the world to give us a jaded perspective on something that God has ordained and something that is so beautiful in the sight of God. So when we talk about that, and even in marriage, and we talk about the example that he uses with marriage and the church. Think about this. He has compared this to his church. He styles the church as a bride adorned for her groom. So God is making very, very strong analogies here. And so I say this all the time about Christianity in general. So much of our salvation is contingent upon how we treat each other. And how much more so does that apply about how you treat your spouse? And sometimes we hear people and they knock their spouses, and they'll say things, men will talk about their wives to other women, and women will talk about their husbands to other men. And I'm thinking to myself, do you know what that makes you look like? And even on the person on the receiving end of that, I don't want to hear that, because if you'll do that, to the woman who you share your home with, you share your life with, you share your children with, then I know that what you'll do to anybody else. So I'm kind of afraid of people who do stuff like that. And I think that people don't realize just how serious this is and how just by breaking those marriage vows and not honoring your spouse the way that God has told you to, that you can lose your very soul. And then it talks to the man and it says that the man is to love the wife as he loves himself. Love her as you love your own body, and that no one hates his own body. So what that says is, you can't take your paycheck and spend your whole paycheck on some electronics or your clothing and then let your wife go raggedy and hungry. That you can't do that. You're supposed to treat her the same way that you'll treat yourself. And with our wives, that's what it talks about, submitting. And so when you have that woman at home who is in agreement and is working together, and then you have that man who is strong and being a provider, and you have this union that is ordained by God. When you have two people who are held in the heart of God and the love of God is holding them together, and you understand that your commitment and your submission is to each other and to God, how can you go wrong? And again, we allow so many different things to creep in to marriages, and not just marriages, into relationships in general, even friendships and family that are not godly. But if you read this word and you study this word and you abide by what God is telling you to do, a covenant of love. And I say this all the time, love is the most powerful force on earth. And unfortunately, we're living in a day where people will say, I love you. And we throw that word around very loosely. But again, there's that sense of discernment. And the love of God goes from heart to heart and breast to breast. If you say you love someone, they can feel that love. And when you have the love of God and you love someone, that love will be genuine, that love will be true, and that love will last a lifetime.